Funding for the Stoller Report is made possible by a grant from the First American Title Insurance Company of New York. The First American Corporation is the nation's leading diversified provider of business information products and services that impact the major events of people's lives.
Long Island, the Long Island Expressway, the Hamptons, a $75 million house for sale, $750,000 house for rental in East Hampton, Roosevelt Field. Lots of things are happening in Long Island. Developments, big boxes. But today, I'm fortunate that I have people from Long Island and Westchester and Connecticut to talk about developments taking place in Long Island and Westchester and Connecticut. My guests today include Jan Berman, president of Engel Berman Group. Okay. Joseph BENJNATI, managing director of Antares. Brad Blumenfeld, vice president of Blumenfeld Development Group. Vincent Polimeni, chairman of the Polimeni International Organization. Russell Matthews, executive vice president of the Albanese Group, Albanese Development Organization, and Mike Kelly, vice president of development for Pulte Homes. Prior to the show, we were discussing what's happening in Long Island, and somebody said to me, even before I met with you prior to the show, that one thing is similar in Long Island. It probably has the worst traffic, second to Southern California. Long Island today has a insufficient amount of housing, really doesn't have that many companies who are Fortune 500 companies who have their headquarters over there. You have a lot of big boxes. You have some assisted living. What's going on in Long Island? What's happening in Long Island? And then we're going to ask Joe what's happening in Fairfield, because I failed to say, Joe's building some houses, $8 to $10 million up in Connecticut. Jan, what's happening in Long Island from your perspective for all of the enterprises that you're involved with?
Well, from our perspective, what you're seeing on Long Island is endemic of an island that really was developed just after World War II. Nassau County, after the war, was basically fields and farmers and wide open space. It became very, very developed in the next 20 or 30 years. People started moving further east. Today there's more population in Suffolk County than Nassau County. The growth has primarily been in the eastern end of Long Island, which would be Suffolk County. So we're seeing more and more redevelopment within the four walls of Nassau.
So how do we redevelop? How do we redevelop property that's changed? And as I said prior to the show, and for anyone who hasn't been here, we like everyone to be interactive and interrupt. How do we redevelop in Long Island?
We bought a frozen food.
Do we knock stores down? Do we knock buildings down?
We bought a frozen food warehouse in Garden City, knocked it down, and built the Lowe's Home Improvement Center.
How many Lowe's do we need?
Well, it's the top one or two in the chain, so there's a need for that one.
Right, but prior to the show, Vince was saying that there are a number of, there are too many stores. There's going to be
consolidation.
There's going to be consolidation.
The golden opportunity on Long Island, in my opinion, is the downtown areas that have deteriorated and need to be rebuilt. There is where the future lies, if we can get people to understand the fact that we can change the downtown. The transportation is there. You can get on a train. You can go into the city. You can commute from there. You don't require a car. If you build it where the stations are and the railroads are, that's the answer to the future growth of Long Island. But you have to go vertical. They have to allow height.
So when we talk about please, Mike.
To further that point, the village of Patchogue in Suffolk County is one of the first villages to really behold that notion that you have to build around the downtown. We're doing some workforce housing in the village of Patchogue. The property is within walking distance of downtown.
Explain to my audience what was the term?
Workforce housing.
Now, what is workforce housing?
Workforce housing is another term for affordable housing, where the units are sold in conjunction with the Long Island Housing Partnership and Peter Elkowitz's team, where they will market houses at a percentage of median income. So some houses will start at $170,000 and probably go up to $230,000, $240,000.
One of the concerns is not to get the people frightened that the complexion of Long Island will change from the rural nature to the city. But again, if you constrict it to downtown, and only downtown, they'll continue to have the best of both worlds. They'll have their suburban lawns, well-kept lawns there, and the city would only be growing vertically where the city now exists. And the city that's now existing has deteriorated. Not all of them. You know, Huntington is an exception. Obviously,
Great Neck's
an exception. Mineola's not. Freeport's not.
Wait, what's Mineola? Isn't Mineola the county seat?
Yes.
And what's happened? You're saying Mineola has
Mineola needs to be absolutely rehabilitated. And in fact, the current mayor is attempting to do just that. And he's going...
But Russ, aren't you... You're in...
Sure, right nearby.
You're in Garden City. You know, you're in that special area. People want to be in Garden City. And you're so close by. And what's the problem with Mineola?
Oh, the difference is that Garden City was the first planned community in the United States. I mean, they began planning for the increase in use of the automobile beginning back in the 1930s. So when they planned the business district along Franklin Avenue, they made sure that they had a plan in place to accommodate parking, which they developed over time.
Right, but prior to the show, you were mentioning that a lot of the properties, which perhaps is what Jan was saying, have been redeveloped. I mean, you had A&S.
Well,
you had Saks Fifth Avenue over there.
Well, Garden City, though, it was a planned community. The first the first department store was in Garden City. It was called Lessers. Eventually became A&S. That was followed. There was a Martin's. There was Best & Company. All the Fifth Avenue stores, the New York stores, were located on Franklin Avenue. In fact, at one time, it was called the Fifth Avenue of Long Island. That all changed during the late 80s and 90s when there was a Bloomingdale's there. Bloomingdale's moved over to Roosevelt Field. A&S closed. Consolidation, the change in the way the retailing sector developed, they needed larger boxes. Those stores became obsolete. So the downtown, it was a very high vacancy rate, and other uses had to be those buildings had to be redeveloped. Other uses had to be found. So, for example, in the late 90s, we acquired the A&S building, which was owned by a family trust. We had arrest control from the family. They had family members that were scattered across the country. They believed that maybe another department store would come along. Of course, that never happened. And they were advised finally to sell the building.
And what the Albanese...
We converted it to a mixed-use commercial building. We have ground floor retail with banks, a New York Sports Club, 25,000 square foot New York Sports Club, a Viking store, Viking appliances. They have a marketing center there, and 40,000 square feet of office space, of which 35,000 square feet is an office of Smith Barney.
But we talk about Garden City, and Joe is based in Greenwich, Stamford and Greenwich. What is that? For my viewers, what's the similarities with Greenwich and Garden City, if there are really similarities?
Our business, and you spoke in the introduction about the fact that we build $10 and $15 million homes in Greenwich, and it's a lot of fun to talk about, but we're building 10 or 15 of them as opposed to 1,500 of them. And the larger part of our business is a mixed-use development project that will be on the waterfront in Stanford that will contain, maybe between 2.5 and 3 million square feet ultimately, and between 1,500 and 2,000 condominium units. And I think the lesson is that it applies to the greater New York metropolitan area, not just Fairfield or Westchester or Long Island, but the fact that we have had to buy a former site owned by a large manufacturing company that has a 1 million square foot manufacturing facility.
Right, Pitney Bowes.
Pitney Bowes, which we actually have to take apart and move out in order to be able to build these houses. And it gets to the fact that there simply is not enough land in the New York metro area to meet the demand for housing. There are a lot of jobs, there's not a lot of land, and there's not a lot of land that's next to train stations, that's next to adequate automobile transportation. In our case, in Stamford, that's next to the water, and that drives it. So, while it's fun to talk about the $10 or $15 million house, the reality is we have a New York metropolitan area with 10, 15 million people in it, and there's a robust job market, and there's a demand for housing.
There's a demand for housing, but as I was saying prior to the program, there are certain people who can afford to be in your $10 to $15 million homes. Pulte, which is a very large developer headquartered in Michigan, I mean, the homes that you're building in Long Island, you have 4 communities set up right now?
Right.
What are the price ranges of those?
We have a 90-unit condominium job in Bayshore, and the prices are started at about $380,000.
Is that what we call a PRC, a planned residential community?
No, it's actually a split community where some of the units are age restricted, 55 and older, and the rest are market rate with non-age restricted.
So the 55 and older, and that's an interesting thing because we were trying to get that idea before. What is happening in quite a bit in Long Island is these planned retirement communities. Originally, it was supposed to be 62 and over, I believe, correct? And then they changed the
Golden
rules.
Age ordinance. When you do Golden Age housing, it was 62 and older. But a lot of these age restricted, they brought it to 55. But the new buzzword on Long Island has become that they want in every development now a portion of the housing set aside for more affordable. John Venditto recently passed an ordinance in the town of Oyster Bay where there's a next generation housing ordinance. So they're creating housing now for young people who graduate college and want to come back, and it's 3 times the median income.
Right, and the median income in Oyster Bay is 83,000. Right. So the house cannot sell for more than $250,000.
$250,000. It's typically going to be a 1,400-foot townhouse with a garage. So what they're doing is, in Huntington, the buzzword now is affordable housing. If you want to do something in that particular town, you will have a component of housing, which will provide, because what's happening is, and you said at dinner, if every house is, what did they say, the median house in Nassau?
The median house was
579,000,
I heard.
Everybody can't afford that.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, most of my viewers cannot afford it. And, we're in a very skewed market.
And in Westchester County, the average is
680,000.
680,000, which is probably the highest in the tri-state area. And our project in Armonk, New York, called the Cider Mill, which only has 27 homes, 11 of which are attached, and 16 are single-family homes that sit on their own lots, there's a building moratorium. So the demand is substantial for the homes, but it's being exacerbated by the fact that the municipalities are putting in place building moratoriums. The environmental agencies are creating larger and larger buffers outside of wetlands, which didn't even exist 25 years ago. So there's a whole different dimension of absorption, the technical word of land use, that's not because people are buying it and building homes on it, but because municipalities are really, really putting a governor on new development.
Speaking of municipalities, when you build homes, people have to have retail. And something that Brad and Blumenfeld Development is doing is you're taking a former Edo manufacturing facility.
Right, and you're seeing that. We've done that successfully over the last, I'll say, 20 years. You need to remember that Long Island was largely a aerospace industry and had a heavy industrial component on it. And by and large, the manufacturing sector has been phased out. So really the foundation of our company and a lot of other development companies on the island have been that they recycle industrial buildings and convert them either into office, tear them down and do retail, or do some...
So how many years is that one? And for my audience, many people, including my wife, who knows that I enjoy traveling to the Tanger Mall, this is a combination with Apollo Real Estate Advisors, the Blumenfeld Development, and the Tanger Outlet.
Tanger Outlet.
And this is what we call, this is a new type of shopping
This
center.
is smart style. We call it smart style development, where we're
Vince,
combining.
we said this is lifestyle development?
Well,
Lifestyle,
lifestyle is a new
smart
buzzword
style.
right now, right? Lifestyle.
And,
We're-
and
we're
for, and
one
for my
ahead.
audience who have never heard this term,
style.
because we've been talking about New York City, we don't have, there's not enough land over here. What does that mean?
We've
And you're too
reached
quiet
out-
of a group. I'm really,
Yeah.
Jan, you got to get back to the old days when we were on radio. Yeah.
What we've seen really started we started first in Florida in this. There's this real successful development called Meisner Park. And without fail, almost every municipality said, we want to have something like Meisner Park, where you bring housing and jobs and retail in a mixed-use environment.
And housing in Meisner Park's case.
Right. And what we've done in our Edo project, or Tanger project, is brought in a entertainment component through movie theaters and restaurants, and added that to the shopping experience.
Right.
So they'll
I can-
have an entertainment
Yeah,
component.
Vince.
I
Please.
call it, I will get back to the cities again. I call it vertical integration, where you've got housing, you've got retail, you've got even office, utilizing and getting a much greater yield on the same piece of land. The reason the prices are so high is because you have no yield.
Yeah.
If you
It's
want to
no
get the
density.
prices down, you've got to get the
Gotta
yield
get
up.
density.
I mean, if you
And the only way to get the yield up is to go up.
You know, if you talk about yield, and you know, we'll go to Brooklyn right now, and that's not the subject today. 2 months we're going to be talking about Williamsburg. You know, Brad was saying before, and everyone was saying, you said it with Pitney Bowes, there's no more manufacturing. And Williamsburg, there's no more manufacturing. There may be some artisans and some other manufacturing. And the big problem, which is allegedly going to be resolved in 2 weeks at the City Council, is that they want to allow, I mean, it's the water. You know, it's beautiful, right on the water. And they're trying to figure out in a planned development of how high you can go. And they're saying if you're on Kent Avenue, you can go 6 stories. If you go on the water, you can go up to 20, 24, depending on the amount of inclusionary affordable housing. In Long Island, from what we said prior to the show, the tallest building in Long Island is what, 15 stories?
16.
16 stories.
And there's one. Then there's EAB Plaza with
That's
two
right.
towers, and that's 13 stories. Then you go down from there. So what happens is typically they allow you 2 stories plus a dormer, which means you can build something within the
2.5
roof, the V of the roof.
So what about Charles Wang of Computer Associates, his plan for Nassau Coliseum to build this 60-story lighthouse, called the Lighthouse, with a 5-star
It's a
hotel?
great plan. Will it ever get approved? Probably not.
Well,
But
we've
if
tried
it did
to
get
do-
approved, it'll break all the ice and it'll open up.
Do you think it'll be a success?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Russ?
I would agree, but height isn't the only issue. It's the
Fine,
the
let's
biggest-
go over the other
The
issues.
main issue there is the infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure.
The
When you
density.
increase
He's right.
yield,
How do you move
increase
the people around?
There's
how do
no
you move
mass.
people
There's no
around?
mass transit. You're going to have
The
thousands of
infrastructure
people
doesn't
I
coming
have
to
a
work,
question.
coming to live.
Do you build maybe monorails? I mean, do you? I
Who
mean,
pays for it?
Well,
Where does it
actually,
go? Where does that monorail go?
Tom Suozzi is talking about a monorail now, and I question whether that makes any sense because everybody on Long Island is in love with their car. I mean, you've got people who go to shopping centers and they're in their cars. They can't get out of the cars. You know, I don't see anyone going on the monorail and go shopping with bags and stuff and go back to their car. It's just not going to happen.
So I'll tell you what we've done in Armonk in order to try and create this cider mill project that we have has 27 homes in it. And because of the price of land and the inability to build elsewhere, what we've chosen to do in what is one of the best school districts in the country is to take amazing finishes, put them in the homes, incredible kitchens, incredible baths. We've taken the maintenance feature completely off the table. People don't have to do anything to live in the homes because everything is done for them, all of the exterior maintenance. And people can stroll into town, can roll baby strollers into town or walk to restaurants.
but Joe, that's 27 homes. And what I'm trying to
That's not
say
gonna
is
That's not the impact.
that's the impact is the question. I mean, if we want to talk about strolling and giving services, Jan is a principal of Bristol Assisted Housing, and they have 4 magnificent assisted living, where the average age is 82.
85, 86.
Okay, 85, 86, and for $3,600 a month, they can have
3 meals a day, wellness services. We take care of all of their needs. We just started our 5th Bristol, but we bought an old shopping center, North Woodmere, and we created a beautiful facility for seniors.
Right, and you know what you also did? When you did that, those people who moved in there now have sold their homes
to a younger
to a
family.
younger person who's done something in the same way that these planned retirement communities have done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and they've created. I mean, what you know?
You got to allow the first-time buyer the ability to buy something and then hedge up.
Right.
And first-time buyers with young buyers, you've got to give them something that they can buy under $500,000 and probably preferably $400,000.
Well,
And I also-
and then
we're buying a
they can
factory.
basically move
Brad?
it on.
The other
Now
thing
I'm getting
I
a
think
little more
is the
interaction.
what Vince is saying about building the downtowns makes sense, because what you need to do is attract young people and not have a brain drain on the island.
Now, the young people normally are
You
working
need-
in the city.
They don't
And if
have.
they can get
there's
the
no
place
They can build it
facilities
by
for
the
them.
railroad. It's great. It's a
Right.
home run.
There's no
So
facilities
what-
for them.
That's
to
everywhere. It's
entertain.
all over the place.
What I'm hearing is you're saying to me that most of the people, a good, I don't want to say most, a good portion of the people who live in Long Island travel to Manhattan for their job.
Well,
I
the
think
younger
we're talking
ones.
about
No,
younger
talking
people.
about the-
80% of Long Islanders work on Long Island.
I'm talking about the
Oh,
young
really?
That's right.
Young
According to the
marrieds.
Roush report.
But the issue
And
is
those 80%, what do they do? I mean, I read in my research that most of these people work for small companies for less, would have less than 100 employees. Is that the
Because
type?
we've moved away. The defense industry was the major employer on Long Island, and today that industry, of course, is downsized.
Teachers,
We
healthcare
went through
workers.
the early 90s. We went through a downsizing in the financial services industry. We've survived that. The result has been it's become much more entrepreneurial.
and more high tech, which
Yeah.
doesn't require as many people.
But Mike, if I asked you where the largest trading floor in the world sits today,
Stanford.
Stamford, Connecticut, and it's at UBS, and they're building another tower, and now the Royal Bank of Scotland is looking to put their North American headquarters and move another 2,100 jobs.
Joe,
there.
it's a good, interesting point, because why hasn't Long Island been able to attract companies like that to go? Why don't we have a UBS?
We never had the big blocks of space. You know, you used to go to
Wait a
northern New
second.
Jersey.
Aren't there some of the spaces? What's the largest floor plate, would we say?
Probably 50,000 be the largest
Right.
floor plate.
We never
And that's
had those
only a
big
handful of those.
expanses of. They used to build 2 or 3 million foot buildings in New Jersey. We never had the land to do that kind of construction, and we never geared ourselves
But-
to
but,
that.
you know,
Stanford
you're
is a city. Stanford has high-rise development.
right. But
What's the
you're
highest
in the
building in
office
Stanford?
building.
Westchester is also an example where
White Plains.
Texaco, White Plains moved out, Morgan Stanley moved in.
But most
Very large
But what
block
happened
of
in
space.
Westchester was you had a large in the 80s when Lowell Schulman built all of this and Robert Martin built. There were a lot of major companies going in there. Those companies have relocated, with the exception of the Morgan Stanley and so on. Those large companies went out.
Well, you
Philip
don't-
Morris sold.
You don't have the land on Long Island. You don't have the reliable power. You don't have the tax base is much higher when you're competing against New Jersey and
Right. Russ was saying prior to the show that taxes in an office building in Garden City are how much?
About $8 a square
A
foot.
square foot. And
And retail, it's probably 10 to
Retail,
12.
Islandia Shopping Center, we're looking at $7 a square foot. That's Suffolk County. $7 a square foot.
And
Add
even
the CAM
industrial
on
is
top
$4 or
of that.
$5 a foot. People charge $5 a foot for the space in New Jersey, and we're paying $5 in taxes for industrial space.
You know-
So we have to get $10. And
But
what's
we
happening is if
moved to a
taxes
now-
go up, they pick our pocket.
We've moved
because
to a knowledge worker economy where technology enables traders not to have to be down on Wall Street. They can be in Westchester. They can be in Fairfield. They can be in Long Island. You also have a post 9/11 environment where companies believe it's wise to have their assets and their people distributed in different places.
right, but that in many cases are back office. Steve Roth, who most of you will call a visionary, from Vornado, spoke a couple of months ago, and his comment was, in the 70s, which relates to, I think, your initial comment, people wanted to go to the suburbs. They wanted to leave New York City. They didn't like what they were saying. They wanted a house. They wanted some land. They wanted a nice place.
Pre-Rudy.
Pre-Rudy, right. And what he said was, everybody wants to come back to New York City today. And I think that's rather evident by these outrageous prices for apartments, and everyone is people are coming back. People want to be in the...
But you saw that in Miami Beach, south of 5th Street. You wouldn't walk there. and it got a new zoning, and they knocked down every old house, and now it's flourishing, and it's got tons of condos and shops and stores.
Yeah, but forget Miami
You've
Beach.
seen
Let's
it
go
in
to
West
Nassau
Palm
County.
Beach.
You know,
What Vinny's trying to say, and he's right, is we should be able to create in our downtown areas, they should condemn whole blocks,
Right.
and they should condemn it deep enough that you can create the height he's talking about.
What you need is
That's a
strong
perfect
leadership.
case.
You
Yeah.
put retail on the first
Strong
floor and
leader-
residential
strong
above.
leadership is the village of Patchogue. The mayor of Patchogue is taking one block south of his main street, and he's setting up that block for condemnation if need be. But that's going to be his smart growth
And if
block.
they condemn it before they change the
on
zoning, they
5
create
acres.
the value for themselves. They'll get their money
That's right.
back.
What
That's
he's
right.
going to do for the retail in that downtown area is going to be tremendous.
And you
I-
see the effective leadership, a Republican mayor in White Plains, Joe Delfino, a Democratic mayor in Stamford, Dan Malloy, both of which are leading strong redevelopment efforts in their cities that are bringing businesses.
and if you go to the next city, Yonkers, they're doing nothing.
It's not a city we do business in, and it's not a city whose leadership.
I mean, when we did the show on Westchester, everybody said White Plains, Stanford, Yonkers, it's nothing.
Nothing.
And what we were saying part of this program is that you said that if you think zoning is bad, it's terrible in Long Island. It makes New York look like a lullaby. I mean, tell us a little bit about the zoning problems that you've seen, Brad.
We've seen problems. What you need in each instance that was mentioned, you had a strong leader. And I know that there have been, we've gone to towns that have had strong leaders and helped us successfully get through projects. A town like Babylon on Long Island has a very strong leadership group that wants to promote development and improve their tax base. There have been, often what you have is sites where there's not strong leadership and there are 2 or 3 people or up to 20 people that will scare a supervisor from making a decision. There are moratoriums all over the place in Suffolk County. What you need from the developer side is to have a long-term commitment and stay and be able to work with a project.
You really need these village the village mayors to be responsible for when they upzone. They in essence it's tantamount to a taking. They've taken your rights away.
Constructive
And they've taken right.
For
And
my
they've taken-
audience, explain what an upzone. I mean, I don't want to play inside baseball. here.
If
What's
let's
an up-
make it simple. If you had the ability to build a house,
One house,
2
one
houses on an acre, and they said, well, now you can only build 1 house on an acre, making it very simple.
So they downzone.
Well, they
No,
they
that's
That's
upzone.
just an upzone. It's a better use. Or they say instead of a 50-foot front yard, you got to have a 100-foot
Right.
front yard. So
Now,
now all of a sudden
think
the
about-
building shrunk by virtue of them squeezing.
Think about the person that has the 1 acre where he could have sold off a half an acre to someone and got money for it. They have effectively, literally taken that money away.
Right, and
Hence
what
it's
ends up
taken.
happening is
so now
these-
if they were made to pay everybody when they decided to do these things, I'll tell you how quickly that would change.
And
So
what-
I mean, not just people who had everybody, including people who were there already living there, say, all right, we want to make changes zoning now. You got to have 1 house on 2 acres. But we're going to pay all those people the difference of what they just lost in value. We'll pay you.
Right.
You know
And
how
what they do
quickly
is
that would change.
It constrains supply, which exacerbates price increases and makes these towns less affordable for middle-income families.
And the middle-income people don't understand the fact that they've lost.
Now,
And,
wait,
and it hurts
wait,
the
wait,
tax
wait,
base because
no,
the
no,
extra house would have paid taxes.
They have, and they don't realize it.
But let's. You developed. You got zoned in the town of West Hampton, on the former drag racing facility,
The West Hampton drag strip.
the West Hampton drag strip, a property which you purchased, your company purchased, where according to my research, the drag strip was paying $60,000 a year in taxes. Now, on the same property, the township is going to get $600,000 in taxes.
Probably $1.2 million by the time the
Yeah,
smoke clears.
by the time it's
At
over.
least, and probably, as you say, $1.2 million. And for my audience, the reason is because the prices have gone up so
That
much.
doesn't
But that
include
got-
all the construction and the workers that come out there and
But that
spend
got
money in the
zoned for
town.
one reason. The people did not want the drag strip. That was the largest rezoning in the history of the town. People on Saturday and Sunday used to listen to those cars, and on Monday they were calling town hall and saying, we can't live with this. I went there one day, there was one guy taken away in a helicopter, an ambulance helicopter. Then they had a thing in the back with go-karts. Some kid was in an accident, he was in an ambulance. It was a crazy situation, like the Wild West. So That's why that got done, and it still took years to get it done. So you have to understand.
But
if
you
they
know
want
what
things, they
Mike
can
just
do it.
said
Well-
is besides the taxes, you were able to increase jobs. Sure. You know what you can do over here. If what you're doing, you know, at the Edo facility, and what you're trying to do in certain facilities, and if Nassau County would ever figure out how they can consolidate their property, which is what we said prior to the program, they'd be able to be in better shape.
Yeah, it's you know, it's smart business. If you can operate out of one business facility, how much money are you saving in rent?
Well,
It just makes good
Nassau
business.
County owns these properties, and because of that, pays no taxes. And
No, let's explain to my audience, which is something that very few people realize in the New York market. New York City, New York owns a lot of. They don't own that many buildings. They're a tenant in many of these buildings. So, fortunately, unfortunately, they don't pay taxes or something over there. Nassau County owns
about 120 individual properties. A lot of them are very small. Some of them are quite sizable. They do not pay taxes because they own it. They're tax-free. And the concept was basically put those properties back on the tax rolls and consolidate government in one or two locations. And then the money that they're losing on just by not getting revenue from these buildings, which were antiquated, need to be completely redone anyway, were completely cost efficient. Just think of all the reception areas there were at 120 buildings that you could have one reception.
Well,
But the shame of it was when Tom Swazi became county executive, he found that the county had no records as to what they owned.
That's right.
What they were
They
leasing.
had no clue.
How much it cost to run. The government was broken.
Well, and actually, before Tom Swazi, my understanding, and you'll remember this, it cost the county $42 a foot to run their office buildings, which they owned and had no mortgage, and they paid no real estate taxes.
That's right.
So
That's
that's
very
what
good
Swazi
administration,
inherited.
it sounds like.
Inefficient.
That's what
what
Swazi inherited.
But that's what he inherited right from.
So there was a great deal of waste. There was fraud, abuse, and that's negatively impacted real estate development in Nassau
So a
County as
major
well.
contrast to what a Mayor Delfino in White Plains or a Mayor Malloy in Stanford or a Jim Lash in Greenwich have done, where there's been good leadership, good results.
Leadership is everything.
That's
Poor
it. And
leadership,
that's been
poor
very
results.
important.
There was a national study of housing affordability, and it ranks Long Island as the last in affordable places to live. The median house price has doubled in the past 4.5 years, and as one person said, Long Island doesn't have a housing problem, we have a crisis. Where is Bill Levitt today when we need him? Pulte Homes, where are you?
Exactly.
Jan Berman, where are you? This is everybody's saying, what's going on?
We have 3 million people, and we build 4,000 houses a year. Yeah. It just doesn't
Supply
cut
and
it.
demand.
But
Doesn't
wait,
make-
you have a son. You have a son. He has to find housing.
He's lucky I'm his father.
I agree. People work in Vincent shopping centers. Vincent owns a 400,000 square foot shopping center, a number of shopping centers. People work in your buildings. People work in the properties of the Albanese Development Company. Where do these people live? I mean,
You know where a lot of people live? They go back to their parents' home and they make an apartment in
That's
the
right.
basement.
That's the problem. Yep.
And they make a one-family home into a two-family home.
Right.
And what's
Illegally.
happening
Illegally.
and to make it worse, there's now a fund, and every time you buy or sell a property in many of these towns, they collect a 1 or 2% surcharge. You know what they do with that money? They buy more land
To keep it off the market.
to keep it off the market.
Which drives the prices
And they
up
have
for
bond
him and
funds, and
me
they
and-
raise money through your taxes, and they buy more land to keep it off the market, and they have moratoriums to keep land off the market. And it's very much an attitude of, we have ours, you can't have yours. We
it's
don't
like
want
what you said before about one of the Westchester towns.
Well,
moratorium, and we can't do anything.
Yeah, or I see in where there's some affordable housing, you see new immigrants moving into cities like Port Chester, cities like Mount Kisco, cities like Norwalk in Connecticut, taking the place of neighborhoods that 50 years ago might have been Western European immigrant neighborhoods, and that's where they're finding 2 and 3 family housing where cousins are living together and they're living the American dream, and they're starting with the starter home, and eventually they're ultimately going to send their kids to the schools, and their kids are going to move from blue-collar professions to white-collar professions, and it is the American dream that gets played out. So it's not just
we don't have the
Much to
starter
the
home.
credit of Tom Swazi, Steve Levy, Jim Morgo. A lot of these guys are starting to create a little mojo, let's say, a little momentum in this effort for workforce housing. And I think eventually, from a developer standpoint, we're almost on the side of the angels when it comes to being able to get some density, because the mindset is starting to change. People realize, government officials realize that we have to build density, and we have to do it in downtown areas.
It's the only place you can do it.
It's a smart growth initiative that's taking hold.
Let's take, you talk about growing up in Brooklyn. We were talking about A&S. I remember we'd go out to Hempstead, and Hempstead had,
The
A&S.
planes, the Hempstead
Hempstead was
planes.
it.
Right, and you had all these properties, and then Hempstead went in the gutter. I think that's a nice situation to say. Now, Hempstead has become a big box, from what I understand. A couple of major big boxes are opening up there. Do you think certain of these towns should perhaps have gambling? Do you think that's...
Absolutely. I have been talking about that now. I have a major problem with the only people who can capitalize on gambling on it are the Indians here on the East Coast. And I don't understand why that should be. What's wrong with gambling? I mean, you have OTB, that's gambling last time I checked, and they're all over and the government runs it. Why can't you have gambling as a form of entertainment? The revenue that would be generated by gambling is incredible, and you just control it. Again, downtown is where you should have gambling. It should be controlled. It should be allowed to be put in a certain place. It should be part of the downtown scene.
Do you think you should
Preferably
put
in my
gambling-
building, it's where it
No,
should
no, I
go.
agree. No, do you think gambling should be in Mineola?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Any downtown village, any village where you've got people there.
No, are we talking poker? I mean,
They have it now. It's just bingo.
Slots.
Yeah,
He's talking
slots.
high-stakes slots. He's talking probably
Yeah.
poker. Maybe not craps or that, but maybe
You
even that.
could. It doesn't make a difference. Gambling's gambling. What's the difference? You got to start decide what.
I mean, but you're right. OTB is there.
Yeah.
They have all this.
That's not gambling.
What
'Cause it's
about-
owned by the government?
Well, what about buying the lotto tickets? What do you call that? It's like, when did that not become gambling?
Right, Super Bowl, right?
I don't understand why we can't do that. And frankly, the revenue generated by gambling would be so incredible, our tax problem would go away. And again, you can control it by simply putting it downtown. Put it into the vertical buildings we're talking about. Put it on the first floor, or even in the middle. Retail on the first floor, gambling on the second floors, office space, residential.
We have another
then you
problem
got
on
the train
Long Island.
station right there.
What are the other problems?
It costs $15,000 on average to educate a student on Long Island. So a family buys a house and has 2 or 3 children, costs the school district $30,000 or $45,000 a
You
year.
don't think that problem is in New York City?
We're talking about Long Island.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to...
So while the school districts are in the business of educating, they would prefer to have less customers. So why do you think everything we look at is 55 and older and 62 and older and first-time home buyers with limited bedrooms? Because
2
school
bedrooms.
districts
They
in general
won't allow you to do it.
don't want more students. Now, the opposite side of the coin is when we build the 55 and older housing, these people typically sell a house, maybe to a
3 or
younger
4
family.
bedrooms.
Right, and it does create an opportunity, but you have a real problem that the school boards very often come out against projects, and when they do, they send their newsletters out, and they have a very long list of people who are in the school district, and very often that becomes a problem for us because it's a rash of people against a project.
Mike, there's no disputing the success of what's going on in the New York City real estate market right now, but we're seeing at the Cider Mill in Armonk where we're producing unbelievable homes for people that are coming out of New York City, and they're saying, I can get a great school district.
Yeah, no private
and
school.
I don't have to send my kids to private school, and I'm paying $1,500 or $1,800 per square foot for a condo. Forget co-ops, because you really can't get into co-ops in New York City, and that's why I'm coming to the Cider Mill in Armonk.
$1,500 a foot for a condo.
Not in Armonk. I'm
No,
saying
the
they're
ones they're
coming to
selling in Manhattan.
Armonk.
They're selling
Yeah,
in
but-
Manhattan.
but, you know,
I'm
but-
getting
but-
all of this
Maybe
for
too.
$500 a square
but
foot.
this relates, prior to the program, we were talking about, and you brought a very interesting thing. A couple of months ago, a number of my guests, we were talking that the bubble or what's happening in New York is people would go to a cocktail party and they said, like the stock market of 1998, not of today, they would go and they say, I just made $50,000. My unit went up by $50,000, or my unit went up $100,000. And you, Engel Berman with WCI, developed this property in Eastport, not too far from West Hampton, not far away, and they didn't have a drag race over there. They just had the Sunrise Highway over there. You developed this property, Encore Shores, I believe, and the units originally started at $400,000 if you went to one of their other facilities to look at it. So it was from this plan or something like that. And prior to the show, you said they're selling for what, $600,000?
I think they're over 700.
They're over 700,000. Now, if I'm an investor, I made $300,000. What were you
It beats
explaining?
a sharp stick in the eye.
No, it beats the sharp. But you were saying there that you've included something in the
No, he
program.
restricts them.
You restrict.
from what we call flipping.
We put in our
in our business.
We
You
put
can't
in-
flip it for a profit unless the
in our
developer
condo
gets a
book,
piece.
if you sell a home in the first 3 years after closing, if we haven't sold all of our homes, we want 10% of the gross selling price when you resell that home.
But what if you've sold all of your homes?
Then I don't care, because I'm not competing with that person anymore. So we try to
Do you think
avoid
all these? Do
speculators.
you think all of
Jen
these
keeps
people?
3 or 4 off the
No. Do you think all of these people, they go to contract, they have to put a 10% deposit, or
we
a fi-
usually get 10%, then 5% when the foundation is poured, and then 5% again. So we actually end up with 20%.
so they could be in for 20%.
Right.
You're building new projects. A number of these people are over 55.
Sometimes, and sometimes it's market rate. In Rockaway, we're building market rate apartments.
Right. But what happens over here if interest rates spike? Because we were talking
There's
before.
no
prior to the
Michael,
question.
I'm
show.
glad you brought that up.
It's interest
Yeah.
rate
Okay,
sensitive.
Russ.
I mean, you brought up 1998, irrational exuberance. Everyone talked about there was the buzzword was a new economy,
Everybody wanted to be a day trader.
right? Everyone had to own certain stocks. You had to own them. And we see the same thing happening now in real estate. What we see going on, I don't think there's anyone here that believes that it's sustainable at the rates that we've seen over the last few years.
But
It's
we're
interest
lucky-
rate driven.
But we have limited
We're in a
production.
land-constrained
You know,
marketplace where-
I have a place in Miami, and in Miami, 80% of the purchases of new construction are speculators. And there's something like 80,000. Now, there's only, what, 500,000 people in Miami? 80,000 new units coming to market. We have 4,000 coming. So to some extent, we're buffered.
Right, and it's not only the land problem, it's also the zoning problem that adds to, it's an impenetrable market. When you get into whether it's office, retail, or residential, it could take 3 to 5 years to get a project.
I think the problem here is not the developer problem, it's the owner problem. People who have bought houses with no down payment at all, 100% financing with fluctuating interest rates, when those rates go up and begin to ratchet because they didn't fix it, they're going to be in very serious trouble.
But let me
they
give you
can't make that monthly
let me
payment.
give-
I mean,
as
people-
opposed to talking about speculators, though, let me give you a different perspective of an empty nester couple who bought a home from us for $2 million, who said to me, if I had $1 million in General Motors stock and I had $1 million in IBM stock, there's a chance that the $2 million house that I buy can go down to $1 million. But I'm going to get up in the morning and enjoy this house and live in it. And if those two stocks that I own go from $2 million to $1 million, I'm going to look at that statement every month and it's going to gall me. I think you have people liquidating financial assets to invest in real estate assets, not just for
That's not the
speculation,
point I'm making,
but
though.
for enjoyment.
That's not the point I'm making.
If that stock or that house goes to $1 million, they're not going to be so happy
They're
living
still
in
kicking
there.
themselves.
Right.
No, I'm talking about the people who have stretched their budget to the limit because of very inexpensive interest rates, 5%, and they have 100% financing.
That's the
If
Harley
that goes up
Davidson
1
phenomenon.
point-
People aren't making the payments on the Harleys, so they're getting them all back. The stock dropped 9 points the other day. That's what you're worried
That's what I'm
about.
talking about. Now, I'm talking about the
Yeah.
point where you reach a point where they have fixed
People say,
incomes.
I can't
they
make the
can't
payments
pay
anymore.
it anymore. Then what happens?
it back.
What
Does
happens?
anyone forget the
Banks
negative
try to take it back.
amortization mortgage, dime savings bank? I mean, we've
There's a-
seen
there's
this
another
before.
You remember your days as a banker?
Yes, I do. And I remember doing workouts.
And,
I
and,
remember
you know,
bank
if you
people
read,
showing up
you know,
with
you
their
pick up the
keys to their
Sunday
apartments
Times.
in New York.
Yeah,
you
take
pick
it.
up the
Take
Sunday
it.
Times, and you
Bankers in
see
the real
these
estate
teaser ads that you can come in and get a 3% mortgage. I mean, there are these offers. You know, they were tied to LIBOR and all this, so you pay the points. These are very dangerous because they can go up 6 points.
That's right.
They can have a 6%.
Which
I
is
don't think
a
these are
triple of a
people who are
person's monthly
buying
cost.
houses over for yours. I think we're talking about people who are buying different type of houses. I don't think the people who are buying in your community, who are spending $1.5 million, are the same customers that we're talking about over here.
The other thing that's interesting, though, the over 55 market very often pays all cash for those houses. A lot of them have
They
sold
have
a house and they're in all
100%
cash.
equity quite often in their
Right.
present homes.
Right.
The trick to it is selling that house.
The first house,
The first
right.
house.
But the
And it's a
second house becomes
trickle-down
an
effect,
all-cash purchase.
because you can get to the closing for your house, for that new construction house, if they didn't set up their
Mike, the
closing in
folks
time,
that I'm talking
they're in
about
big
is
trouble.
to build on that comment are people who are empty nesters who may have bought or built a home for $30,000 or $40,000 in the mid '70s that are selling their home for $2.5 million and downsizing into $1.5 million or $2 million, and they are coming with cash. And I'm seeing it in the Westchester market. I'm seeing it in the Fairfield market. It is not the speculator market that's going on in South Beach, or not the speculator market that's going on
What they're
in
saying
Las
is the
Vegas.
person that buys the house of the guy that bought your house with cash.
That's the one that has a problem.
That's the one that
I'm not
they're
talking
saying
about the
could be the
person that sold
concern.
it. They're the smart ones.
It's not your buyer. It's
The
the
one
guy
who bought
that
it,
sold his house
100%
to get to
financing.
you.
There's another major problem going on right now. All these first-time investors into commercial real estate haven't got a clue what they're doing. They're getting 10-year balloons at 5%. These are income-producing properties now. They are just barely making enough money on this to pay the debt. In 10 years, when we go back to 8-9% interest, that property is going to go back to the bank.
That'll be the benefit of the higher interest rate marketplace. A lot of those speculators will be out of the marketplace.
I mean,
and you'll
you know what
become
Russ said. He remembers when it was the dime. This happened. You know,
Yeah, it was-
cycles
yeah, it was
happen.
in the
It's a-
90s.
It's only
The
a
bell curve
question
for
of
a
20. The bell
21%.
curve is going to be there.
American Savings Bank, Anchor Savings Bank, Dollar Dry Dock Savings Bank, the Bowery Savings Bank, all of those banks failed
No
in
longer
down real
exist
estate. They
because
no
of that,
longer
right.
exist.
Well, keep in
So-
mind, there was another reason for that. That was the Reform Act of 1986, tax
Right.
reform.
Sure.
Act.
SNL
They
Which
changed the bank reserve
completely
ratio.
changed the entire way you bought real
But the
estate.
dime savings bank tanked on residential lending. I mean, it was negative amortization mortgages, a huge.
Yeah.
I mean, you would open up Newsday every week, and there was another cover story about how bad the market was as a result.
You know,
And the
we
banks
were
were failing.
talking prior to the program, and you said what was happening in Garden City about a lot of financial services. How many bank branches can we see? I mean, I know you're happy that you have a nice
Works for me.
You get a Citibank now, but I mean, how many more Wachovias, North Fork, Signatures, Hudson Valley Bank,
Bank
how
of
many,
America.
Bank of America, how many?
Wachovia. I mean, they're all.
They're-
they're-
Wachovia bought
Commerce
out
Bank.
existing
Commerce.
banks
Washington
everywhere.
Mutual.
Commerce.
Commerce
You know,
Bank.
7-day banking, and they don't take small spaces. They like these large spaces.
And they
over
pay top dollar. It's great.
there.
They
They're
pay
good.
top dollar. Great
Okay,
tenant.
good tenant, good tenant. I'm surprised because normally what they like, I know they do that, but they like to own their own property. They have that tendency.
If they can.
If they can.
Well,
can't,
what
they
it's
rent.
evidence of is the New York area is very wealthy population. The business is very good. The Commerce Bank branch in Garden City, they have over 300 branches. That particular branch has almost $800 million in deposits.
Right.
Some
The
of the
most
banks are-
successful.
And they opened, what, a year ago, 2 years
That's
ago?
about 2 years ago.
Some banks are getting creative too. What about Norfolk with Starbucks,
Starbucks.
out in Manorville, out in exit 70? Pull off the expressway, make a deposit, get a cup of coffee. You're on your way to the Hamptons.
Do they charge you for the coffee?
Yeah.
Starbucks does.
Starbucks
No, because
I guarantee you they're subleasing the space.
No, Commerce, they happen to have, you can go in and drop your coins. They have the coin machines and all of that.
Yeah, but I think what you're seeing in the banking, you're seeing in all retail sectors. And banking has become somewhat of a retail group. And when I mean the retail group, national companies, they were tentative to pay higher prices years ago when they first hit New York and the Long Island market. And now they've seen the numbers that they could do. And the numbers on their retail sales are the first, second, third stores in the whole chain. So they're dying to get in, and now they're at a point where they're looking for infill locations to go a mile apart from another Home Depot. Or, that seems to be the trend. There's a huge demand just because the demographics are so strong and the population's growing.
Well, while we're talking about retail, let's talk, Long Island has, I think the first large mall was Roosevelt.
Still is.
Roosevelt
Still is a lot.
Roosevelt Field.
60,
And then you had Valley
Green
Streams,
Acres.
Green
Green
Acres,
Acres.
Walt Whitman.
Walt
Smith
Whitman. And then at one time, when we said prior to the show, we were talking about Kimco acquiring, Kmart, they lost some stores. Now Kmart, Sears, there'll be more stores closing. Toys R Us, the stores are going to close. I mean, Vornado didn't buy this because they want to sell toys. What do you see taking over? When I go through Long Island, I see all those Sears, Kmart, Toys R Us, Kids R Us. What do you see taking over these type of properties? How many more Best Buys
Michael,
do we need?
we had this morning. I was in the diner with the gentleman from Greenwich who just took over Kmart and Sears, and it is clear that there's a lot going on in the retail sector, and that there are in the metro area only a finite number of elite locations in all of these neighborhoods, and that there are certain retailers with great retail strategies, whether it be a Starbucks or whether it be a Whole Foods, that have found a formula, and they're going to replace the retailers like the Caldors of the world who have broken formulas.
Yeah. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I reported in my article in the Sun the Rhineline Mansion, otherwise known as the headquarters for Polo, on 72nd Street,
Sure.
Was sold for $78.2 million. They have one tenant, Polo.
Who bought it?
Who bought it? A group of 2 Irish billionaires. The property was sold. TMW purchased it a couple of years ago for $38 million. Another property the prior week is where the Westbury Hotel was. The retail at the Westbury was sold for it was sold for $132 million, but the price was $6,800 a square foot. $6,800 per square foot.
That was Vornado, right?
No, Vornado bought it, the highest price ever
Unbelievable.
for retail. Now,
You're
Long
talking about-
Island has Americana Mall in Manhasset.
Americana
Mile.
Manhasset.
Right. yes.
Miracle Mile.
Probably the finest mall in the
Otherwise known
country.
as Miracle
It
Mile.
can't be any
Miracle
better.
Mile. What's happening? What do we see in the retail in Long Island? Do we have those Americana malls? I mean, Green Acres is no Americana Mall. Green
There's
Acres
only one
is gone.
Americana mall. There's
yeah.
only one.
That's the
And there
Rodeo
probably will only
Drive
be
of
one.
Long Island.
That's a location. But one of the things about retail, if you go out, probably 10
I
years.
like his Garden City property. I mean, I'll take Garden City.
No,
The Albanese
Garden City-
organization
Garden
has.
City is great.
Thank you. You know, our partner in Garden City is Frank Castagna,
who
who's the
owns
owner of
Miracle Mile.
Americana.
It's a good partner. It's the
Yep.
right
Well, it's
combination. He knows how to.
Well, he executed a vision that is just, I mean, it's just remarkable what he's accomplished there. It's a work of art.
Yeah, he's
And he-
It
Great
rivals Rodeo Drive. It rivals Worth Avenue in Palm Beach. It rivals the best.
Yep.
Michael, we were probably contacted 2 or 3 times per month from elite retailers asking for our assistance to get them onto Greenwich Avenue, because there's just very, very little turnover of retail space there.
There's also X amount of square feet, as you said, on Greenwich Avenue. I
very,
mean,
very little.
We only have a couple of minutes left, and I'd like to ask each one of you to interplay or give an idea. What do you think is going to happen in the next 5 years in Long Island, Westchester, Jan? In all areas, PRC, planned residential community, assisted living, hospitality, new offices, and so on. In a quick
On the
manner.
assisted living side, you're not going to see a lot more assisted living in Nassau County.
Why not?
Because we really have enough beds at this point to support our
But
population.
population is growing. I mean,
It's not
people
growing. It's actually stagnated. The demographics are very good for what we have, but the issue is that you want to keep your facilities filled. On a housing front, we've been buying industrial properties in residential areas to knock them down and to construct housing where there used to be obsolete industrial. On the office side, in Nassau County, I don't see anything other than what you're doing, which is take something down to the steel and rebuild it.
Right,
The numbers have
and
to
you don't
make
see any
sense.
spec buildings in Nassau County.
I think-
Suffolk County.
No, there is. There's one. Weir Associates is building at 130,000 square feet in Jericho. They're adding a 4th building.
But what's
It's ourselves.
130,000 feet?
It's not.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
and there's a building at Tillis that's new there, another 130,000 square feet. But certainly in the realm of things, no, there's very
Mike,
little new. And
Mike,
that's why the existing buildings have been sold at premiums.
as we said prior to the show, the 800-pound gorilla, the Pulte homes.
Yeah, I think the smart growth concept will catch on quite a bit throughout the villages, through the townships. I think we'll see a big effort to have a component of workforce housing in just about every new construction community that comes on
And you
board.
see that targeted the next generation housing.
Next
so people-
generation workforce housing, whatever the buzzword is of the day, but that's kind of it.
Brad, do you think we'll see more outlet centers like the second Tangers, the third Tangers, more outlets, and this new term that we call lifestyle shopping centers that Vince brought up?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to see, knock on wood, you'll see ours get through zoning in the next short while, which will be a big impact. as we said over and over again, there are a lot of constraints. The land is sparse and the zoning is tough. So I don't
And Vince,
see,
what do I see you going to be doing besides doing these shopping centers in Poland, which we didn't tell anything about?
Well, actually, let me go back to a
another
major
show.
concern that I have a little more than 5 years in the future, which I see as the internet as it relates to retail. And I've always said that when you can speak to your computer and it can respond to your spoken word, then dinosaurs like myself will use it. And when you can literally have your body scanned into a computer and say, computer, go out and look for a suit for me and then show it on me. And then go take me to Europe and show me what they have. And there's no reason to go out shopping other than for entertainment. So unless retail begins to evolve and goes into more entertainment, I see a major impact from that avenue more than anything else. Again, when you could speak to that computer and tell your computer, go out there and find me all the suits and give me my options and show it on me, why do you want to go out? It would be so much easier to do that.
Russ, quick. What do you see?
On Long Island, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see dramatic change, but I think I see that leadership is beginning to address all of the constraints and the issues we've talked about that's holding back development, whether it's traffic and congestion and so on. So.
Okay. It's hard to believe, but we finished 58 minutes. I'd like to thank all my guests today for being here. Jan Berman, Engel Berman, Joseph BENJNATI, Antares, Brad Blumenfeld, Blumenfeld Development, Vince Polimeni, Polimeni International, Russ Matthews, Albanese Development, and last but not least, Mike Kelly of Pulte Homes. Next month, the topic of our program is on the state of hospitality in the tri-state area, from luxury hotels, the Plaza Hotel, limited service. Thank you, and see you next month.
Funding for the Stoller Report is made possible by a grant from the First American Title Insurance Company of New York. The First American Corporation is the nation's leading diversified provider of business information products and services that impact the major events of people's lives.